Okay everyone, hello, welcome to the channel. January is here, so a lot of people are getting started with the gym, so I thought I'd take a couple minutes today to talk about the basics, the best way to get started if you want to get fit. So the number one problem that I see a lot of beginners have is a lack of direction. They come in super hot, super excited to train, but after a couple of weeks, the fatigue sets in because they're not entirely sure what they're doing. They don't know if what they're doing in the gym is actually going to translate to gains or to actually making them any healthier. It's really hard to stay committed and consistent if you're not sure that the effort you're putting in is actually going to get you any sort of improvements in the things that you're trying to improve. So today we are going to clear everything up for you. We are going to focus on the things that actually matter, that are going to meaningfully improve your health. So that way you can start off on the right foot, you can make sick gains and make this year the best year of your life health-wise. So in my opinion, there's three main areas that people need to be focusing on. There are others that are important for certain goals, stuff like mobility, hypertrophy, and skill acquisition. But for most people, if you just want to focus on being a healthier human being, getting bigger, faster, stronger, being fitter and more athletic, this is where we should be putting most of our time and energy. Chances are you have a life outside the gym. You have work, you have hobbies, you have family, you have loved ones and responsibilities. So you don't want to be spending your entire life in a gym. If this is the case, you don't have time to dick around with infinite methodologies of training, trying everything that kind of catches your eye. You need to make good use of your time and focus on the stuff that we know is effective. So if we want the stuff that's best for us, that's going to have the best return on our investment, here is where to get started. So starting off with the really simple one is strength training. We kind of all know that this is good for us. Lifting weights makes us stronger, it's good for our joints, it's good for our muscles. This is a really simple place to get started in the gym. So there's a few main movement patterns that you want to be focusing on. There aren't any mandatory exercises. So anyone that says, oh, you have to squat with a barbell or you have to bench press or you have to do whatever, they're bullshitting. There aren't any mandatory exercises, but there are some kind of arguably mandatory movement patterns. And these are squatting. So these are our knee dominant movements. So a barbell squat, a leg press, a hack squat, anything where our knee is going through a good range of motion. We've got our hinges, so that's stuff like our deadlift, our Romanian deadlift, our back extension, even stuff like a kettlebell swing, arguably. Anything that's really hip dominant, that's going to really work our hips, our hamstrings, and our lower back. And then we've got pushing exercises like a bench press or an overhead press, and pulling exercises, so rows, pull-ups, anything where we're pulling towards ourselves. If you're new to strength training, this is where you should really be focusing. These are all called compound movements. All that means is that these exercises use a lot of muscles at the same time. This just means that they've got a lot of bang for your buck. It is much better to spend a lot of your time and energy focusing on these exercises because they are going to train your whole body. A lot of people think that getting bigger and getting stronger are completely separate realms of training. This just isn't true. Good strength training, especially if you're a beginner, is definitely going to have a growth or a hypertrophic effect on your muscles. So you don't need to worry about complicated rep schemes or lots of different exercises for growing bigger muscles rather than just getting stronger. At the start, if you just get stronger, you will get bigger, provided that you're eating enough as well. Outside of those four main movement patterns, a bit of core training, preferably through a full range of motion, can be really, really helpful, and some isolation stuff for any areas that aren't necessarily getting hit by your compound movements, but that you still give a shit about. So stuff like bicep curls, hamstring or leg curls, any area of your body that you want to put a bit more emphasis on, you want to get a bit bigger, that can be a really good candidate for a bit of isolation training. But as long as we're hitting these big movement patterns, that is what matters. 2 or 3 times a week, you don't need to do a million sets and a million reps if you're approaching a good level of challenge in your sets. A really good barometer for how hard we're working without getting into RPE and like auto-regulation systems is just the speed of the bar or the object that you're trying to move. For example, if you're doing a bench press and every rep looks like this, that's probably not a super stimulative set. But if those last couple of reps look a bit more like this, and you're putting a lot of force into the bar, but it's just not going as fast as you want it to, the velocity is reducing, that's a really good indicator that we're in the right neighborhood for productive strength work. All right, so moving on from everyone's favorite to everyone's least favorite, we have got cardio. So I know, most people hate cardio. I used to be that person. I used to be a big cardio skipper, but I promise it is not that deep. You can build a really, really good cardiovascular base without a ton of work, without spending hours on a treadmill or just beating the shit out of yourself all the time. You don't need to put in loads and loads of work, but you do need to do a little bit. If you're serious about athleticism and especially about health, having a good cardio base is pretty much non-negotiable in my opinion. You've got a little trade-off going with your training frequency with cardio. You can go for a more lower intensity approach. So that's what you might call your zone 2 or your easy work. But that is going to take more time out of your week to have a similar or a comparative effect. Versus if you go a bit harder, you really try and beat yourself up and you go quite intense, you can get a really good effect out of that in less time. So I think mixing these two approaches is a really good approach, especially if you're just new to cardio in general. Big misconception about cardio is that it has to be running. I think running is good. I think that it builds a lot of mental resilience and it's a really good skill to develop. But running doesn't have to be your main form of cardio. If you just don't like it, you don't have to do it. There's lots of options for other stuff. So machines, so bike, ski, rower, the elliptical, cycling outside, playing a sport can be really, really good, especially if it's something that you enjoy and you're passionate about, because enjoyment is really, really good for engagement and retention. And any kind of off-feet cardio can be really, really good if you're new as well, especially for slightly older people or if you're coming from an injury. So off-feet cardio just means anything where we're not banging our feet into the floor, like running or walking, essentially. So that can be, again, like the bike, like the ski erg, anything where we're not kind of putting more orthopedic stress on our knees and our ankles and our shins. That can be really, really good, especially if you've got a history of stuff like shin splints or ankle injuries. 2 sessions a week is a really, really good place to start. I generally advocate for one shorter session where you are really pushing the intensity. So that could be an interval session where you're going really, really hard for a short amount of time, then you have a rest, then you go back in. Or it can just be a generally still steady state, but a higher intensity session. And then one slightly longer, more relaxed session. I think that this is a really, really good combination for generally improving your cardiovascular base. Before we move on, I just want to cover the kind of 10,000 steps thing. Steps are a really, really good way to increase your kind of overall base activity rate, especially if you are coming from a very sedentary lifestyle. Aiming for 10,000 steps is really, really good. But I wouldn't, for the majority of people, consider it cardio training or exercise. I think it's something that's almost separate from that and kind of falls more into the lifestyle area. Upping your step count can be a great way to lose weight. It can be a great way to just feel a bit more fresh and to be a little bit more active throughout your daily life. But I wouldn't say it's a replacement for cardio training. All right, moving on to number 3 of our 3 main training areas. We've got power or speed training. This is the area that most people, at least in commercial gyms, tend to neglect the most. But it's also, in my opinion, one of the most important for well-being and feeling athletic. Power, the ability to move fast and produce force, is one of the first skills that we really start to lose as we age. We start to slow down, we become a bit more stiff and a bit more sluggish, and then that is kind of the start of an inevitable decline into a less athletic lifestyle. But power training really is the fountain of youth. The ability to move fast is what is going to keep us feeling young, feeling athletic, and also we do a lot of stuff for reducing the risk of injuries, reducing the likelihood of falls, and just generally making us a more resilient human being. Power and speed training teaches us intent and aggression. The ability to put 100% into a really fast movement is a really, really unique skill that I think is very hard to replicate through just strength or just cardio training. There's several different modalities to train power and speed for most people, and they all kind of feed into each other and improve each other. They are slightly different, but pick 1 or 2 that you like and really pursue them. So I'd say that the easiest ones to kind of get into. So first up, you have sprinting or high-speed running. This is really, really good for generally developing skills. It's a full body stimulus. It is very, very hard to replicate doing basically anything else. It's a very real-world skill. The ability to just cover distance fast is really, really good. It will give you really resilient hamstrings. And overall, I just think it's a great, productive way to make yourself a more athletic human being. The only caveat I would say is if you're going to start sprinting, start off using hills or inclines. This way, you're going to kind of cap your maximum speed and you're just going to be putting a little bit less strain on your hamstrings, especially, again, if you're coming from a more sedentary background or you haven't worked out intensely in quite a while. It's really, really easy to blow out a hamstring if you go too hard, too early on your sprinting. So just start a bit conservatively, find a hill, and get after it. Next up, we have my personal favorite, which is the Olympic lift. So the clean, the jerk, and the snatch. I think this is incredible. It has a much lower barrier to entry than a lot of people think. There is a bit of a steep learning curve, there can be, but I think people believe that you need to spend years studying in a shed in Bulgaria to get any kind of productive stimulus out of the Olympic lifts, and that's just not true. If you want to end up competing in Olympic lifting, then yeah, you will really have to dial in your technique. But if you just want the athletic stimulus that you can get from them to use them as a training tool, we can get a lot of really, really high value stimulus out of less than 100% technique. Olympic lifts make you strong as shit. They are incredible vibes. It is just great fun throwing a heavy barbell around. Great lift to do with the boys, to do on like a big Friday session. And it has a lot of benefits in it that are very hard to replicate using any other training modality. The ability to propel an external object that's really heavy, the ability to kind of reorganize your body to absorb that force. I think these are quite specific skills that are trained by the Olympic lifts that are very, very hard to replicate with any other modality. And last up on power training, we have jumps. So that we're gonna kind of lump in plyometrics, which are like repeated sub-maximal jumps, with our maximum intent jump. So that would be stuff like a broad jump for distance, a box jump, or a vertical jump for height. Anything where you're trying to produce the most force and propel your body aggressively through the air. So compared to sprinting or Olympic lifting, this is generally a bit more accessible for most people. Most people don't necessarily have access to a track. Most people might be a little bit intimidated by the thought of getting started with the Olympic lifts. So this is a really nice way to get started moving fast in a setting that you might already have access to. There's lots and lots of variety within a jump, so it's very easy to create novelty, to keep a high level of engagement. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, I think some exposure to sub-maximal jumps, so plyometrics, where we're having repeated impacts on the ground, is really, really good, not just for developing that bounce, developing that power off the floor, but also for some physiological adaptations. So tendon strength, knee and ankle health, shin strength and bone density. I think plyometrics are a really, really good way. I'm gonna have a video coming about them very, very soon. So as far as training power, I would say do 1 or 2 power movements first in your workout. You can do them on the same day as your strength training, but do them first. As we get tired, we do slow down and we get a lot less kind of productive outputs from our training. So get them done first while you're nice and fresh, and then you can move on to stuff that requires a little bit less energy, like your strength work. It can be a little bit fiddly to train kind of all of these skills concurrently, but it is very, very possible. You probably don't need to do as much as you think. When you're a beginner, most of the work that you're accumulating in that early phase is just learning, it's just skill acquisition. You don't need to be perfect from day one. You're gonna have to practice whatever skill you're trying to learn for a long time to get competent at it. But on the flip side, as a beginner, if you are quite detrained or you're not necessarily exposed to training, you're coming from quite a sedentary lifestyle, you don't need loads and loads and loads of volume to improve. You will improve really quickly because your body is just so unused to the stimulus. This means that we can get really effective training outcomes in a lot of different areas, which I think is the best way to train. I want to be a generalist. If you want to be generally healthier, more athletic, feel fitter, and be more prepared for the vagaries of life and whatever your regular life is going to throw at you, I think that combining these 3 areas, so strength, cardio, and power, is the best way to get started. I appreciate, though, that it can still be really intimidating getting started in the gym, let alone with one area, let alone 3 different areas of training. It can be a lot of information. It can be quite hard to put the pieces together. So if you want help making this year a really, really good year of training, if you want to get started becoming more athletic, if you want to move fast, build your cardio base, get a bit bigger and stronger, I've got online coaching slots available. Check the description for more information. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Cheers.